Welcome to the Think Differently and Deeply podcast series. My name is Glenn Whitman, and I'm the Dreyfus Family Director of the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning at St. Andrew's Episcopal School. The CTTL's vision is a world in which every teacher understands how every student's brain learns. Not only does the CTTL support 100% of St. Andrew's preschool through 12th grade teachers and school leaders toward that vision, but we globally share promising research and strategies in the science of teaching and learning through workshops, digital tools, and publications like Think Differently and Deeply. This season of the Think Differently and Deeply podcast will connect you with the exceptional teachers, school leaders, students, and researchers who authored articles for Volume 5 of Think Differently and Deeply. Today, I'm delighted to welcome my friend and colleague, Tia Henteleff, who is the CTTL's lower school research lead and one of the lower school science and design thinking teachers. We'll be talking in two parts with Tia about her article, The Necessary Art and Science of Classroom Conversations in Early Childhood, which is based on her many years of teaching and her 2023 published book, as we begin Dispositions of Mind, Learning, and the Brain in Early Childhood. Welcome, Tia, to the CTTL podcast studio.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Great to have you. I think we've been delaying and trying to get this scheduled with your teaching load, my teaching load, and our presentations to other schools. So it's great to sort of sit down and finally have this conversation. So I guess the first question I have to ask for the audience is sometimes we get this question, what the heck is a research lead? So Tia, what is a lower school research lead for the CTTL? What do you do? What do you think about?
That's a good question. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about ways to elevate my pedagogy and curriculum and ways to help my colleagues and teachers elsewhere do the same. And I do it through mind, brain, and education research, or other people know it as science of teaching and science of learning. So most teachers don't have the space or the capacity to really devote the time and energy needed to be up on research and be thinking about ways of translating strategies to help them in the classroom. So it's helpful to have someone in that role as a research lead. So I do it for us internally at St. Andrews. And as you know, I'm part of the team creating professional development for teachers elsewhere.
Yeah, no, so lucky to have you. But I also know it is part of your profession, your job description at St. Andrews and for the CTTL. But you and I have had these conversations. You're like, I would do it anyway. This is like, this is a passion for you. So I'm curious. You've had a very interesting journey. How did the science of teaching and learning, the MBE, become a passion of yours?
Oh, I like that question. So it was when I was maybe in my fifth year of teaching pre-K that I realized I did not know enough about the brain development and cognition in the ages of the students that I had. And I was paying attention to what best practices said. There were certain milestones I was told to look out for in terms of child development, but I was questioning my own knowledge base, especially when I was getting into conversations with parents. These things are important.
Oh, sure. Especially parents of younger learners.
Yeah. So, I started to question, are we doing report cards the right way and assessments the correct way? Are we giving parents the correct advice and parent teacher conferences? So for my own knowledge, I applied for a grant so that I could focus on that brain development and cognition ages 3 to 6. I had so much fun doing it and realized there was so much I didn't know and so much clicked into place for me that had real impact on, and we talk about MBE being both a lens and a tool. It had a real impact on my ability to understand and interpret what's happening in front of me, what that means for the big picture of children's development and growth and thriving, but also gave me like actual strategies that I can use in the classroom. And I saw the difference it was making. I was having so much fun with these ideas, and there were certain threads of the research, like the emotion and cognition thread, that I became especially interested in. So I was giving workshops to parents, I was giving workshops to teachers, all for fun. I also knew this science of learning bit that the more I write about this stuff and the more I present about this stuff, I learn it better. So a lot of the presenting and workshopping and article writing I was doing was kind of for myself. but it was also a way that I could spread the knowledge and get other people passionate and interested in it as well.
No, no, absolutely. And talk about your journey because you did some, formal education, some undergrad and grad work,
Mhm.
and then, I know you read a lot, you follow certain folks. Like, who's sort of on your academic sort of crush list of people you sort of follow or research areas that you sort of draw from in your work, both as a student of the work formally, but also now as an individual teacher whose part of her job is to sort of keep an eye out for what's out there.
Okay, so I'll answer that in 2 parts.
Yeah, there was like 5 questions in that one. I'm just gonna go on record. Yeah.
The first part, the whole, like, teacher researcher role that I very much gravitate towards, I was introduced to that idea with the Reggio Emilia approach. So, the Reggio Emilia approach that comes out of Reggio Emilia, Italy, that they highly value research, and they're talking more about the classroom research. In classroom research, heavy documentation, lots of conversations with colleagues to understand how to elevate and iterate teaching practice. That is part of the teaching role in the Reggio Emilia approach towards early childhood education. That was my introduction to this idea of teacher research. But then I got my master's at Stanford University and stayed to work at the laboratory preschool. The laboratory preschool, it's a that's where research is done. So they have a lot of postdoc and professors there doing research on child development. It used to be more affiliated with the psych department. It's gotten more and more involved with the education departments. The marshmallow test that a lot of people know happened there at Bing. So I've been around this whole idea of the teacher playing a researcher role in different aspects since I started teaching. And so I love theory and I love philosophy, and I love to think about the ways that the brain learns and the way we construct reality and how we engage with people and how we build culture together. Those things were always very interesting to me. So those ideas I was paying attention to early on. And like I said earlier, the thread of research with emotion cognition really appealed to me particularly. So Mary Helen and Mardino Yang would be the researcher that I probably pay attention to the most
Right,
and
and she's
have
at
all of
USC at Kendall. No
yes.
competition, I'm sure, between Stanford and USC, but
Yeah,
why
yeah,
not?
yeah. But I've always been paying attention to her and she keeps doing amazing things. So she was very gracious and generous with her time. She let me interview her for my book. She's answered emails that I've sent her, but she also just continues to do mind-blowing things in the space of emotion and cognition. So she would be the first one that I mentioned. But I get excited, to learn about new researchers all the time and being active in the research conferences like Research Ed and Learning in the Brain allows me to always find out about new stuff that's happening out there in research.
Yep. You said a couple minutes ago that, by writing and speaking and presenting, it helps you think better about the work. But you took this sort of big leap. Like, for Think Differently and Deeply, you wrote about a 1,100 word article, 2 pages in the spirit of sort of Malcolm Gladwell. Now you sort of wrote a book, right? Which is certainly more than 1,100 words. So talk to me about that leap. Like, why did you want to write a book, which is a much bigger project and much bigger lift? That's more than just maybe writing for your own sort of edification or learning, but certainly, and it serves sort of this, on my mind, a public good. It filled a gap we needed in the literature. But talk about that big leap from writing a 2 page article for Think Differently and Deeply to writing a book published by John Catt that now is being read by early child and elementary teachers around the world.
So I think there's a few reasons why I wrote that book. And it's been years in the making. So before I actually started typing, I had been thinking about the idea of this book. So for years, one of the reasons is there's just not a lot out there for early childhood education. And there's definitely not a lot out there bridging what works in early childhood education and mind, brain, and education, learning of science, learning of teaching. And then there's definitely not a lot out there bridging Reggio Emilia practice with the science of learning, which I saw connections there, and I wanted other people to see those connections for more than just the fact that it validates what they're currently doing, but they're gonna these two groups of people are gonna learn from each other when they see that there is a bridge there. So I'm excited to help other people get introduced to both the Reggio Emilia approach and also people that are very familiar with the Reggio Emilia approach. I'm thrilled to introduce them to these concepts that are coming out of MBE that helps them elevate and validate the work that they're already doing. So it was a need, I think, out there that there wasn't a book like this written yet in terms of validating the important work that we do in early childhood education, as well as a need to bridge some of the areas in research.
Makes sense. No, and it certainly bridges fills a gap. And I often say, like, we wrote this book, Neuroteach, and I feel like we need a chapter. We're gonna have to steal one of your chapters to target the primary and early childhood space. I think these two books sort of go really well together. I think we got it covered. So I thank you for writing it. I'm curious. Let's shift to the article a bit because there's a word in your title, the necessary art and science of classroom conversations in early childhood. And the word, you made me think hard about the word conversations as a pedagogical strategy and as a gateway to so many other cognitive demands on the learner: metacognition, executive functions, literacy. So I'm not too sure I have the perfect question yet, but talk about the power of conversations that you have with your students and why it's such an important pedagogical strategy.
Thank you for that question. So it is so incredibly underutilized and so incredibly powerful in so many ways
It's a
that
lot
it
of so's. I'm
yeah,
just going to tell you, so you better back it up right
I
here.
know. I'm passionate about this in particular, and I've only become more passionate about it as I've done the presenting I've done for the CTTL, where I've talked to teachers who are noticing the same thing. There is less and less conversations happening in classrooms, and if you are aware of all the different ways you are helping children through intentional conversations, you would never you would never choose to do less of them. So there's so many things happening that I need to focus on one thing at a time. So if we just talk about like literacy, what do conversations do for literacy? Each conversation that you have with a child is like a mini language lesson. You're giving them the opportunities to practice and develop speaking and listening, which are not only half of literacy, but are also precursors for later reading and writing. If you think of literacy as being a house, the speaking and listening piece is a foundational piece. And if you don't maintain that, so you don't just do that at the beginning, you have to do that throughout, because if you don't maintain that, that house becomes wobbly. So the speaking and listening piece is important for developing all aspects of literacy. If you're familiar with the simple view of reading and then Scarborough's rope, and then more recently another reading model that Duke and Cartwright developed, language comprehension very much tied to reading comprehension
Right.
is very much tied to the rich experiences that children have with oral literacy, whether they have them or not. So if we know that conversations are mini language lessons for children to develop literacy skills, the question is then on us, how are we going to use those conversations that we're going to have with them anyways in the classroom, hopefully, to help them develop these really important skills, not just academic skills, but skills in life, right? You need those literacy skills to be successful in life.
Yep. Yep. The connections I was making from both what you wrote and the CTTL's work is how the conversations connect to helping kids self-regulate a bit, maybe even contemper some potential bad behaviors because they're making, and then all the work we've been doing in the CTTL in terms of belonging, right? And I'd love you to maybe talk about that a bit in terms of how do these conversations maybe lead to actually some better behaviors and self-regulation,
Yes.
and truly this sense of what we talk about as academic and social belonging, but really seems like social belonging might take a little priority for some of our younger learners.
Yes. Okay.
There's a lot there, so I apologize.
No, right. So when we are in, if we give conversations the intention and attention that it deserves, then we are addressing so many different important parts of a child's development and thriving. So I was just talking about literacy, but the literacy piece is very much connected to the belonging piece, which is also connected to the sense of agency and the development of self-regulation and the development of understanding and appreciating other people's points of views. It really goes on and on. So to talk about executive function skills and self-regulation skills and how that's connected to conversations, you can think of a conversation as like a mini boot camp for self-regulation. And I've been working with our own teachers a little bit to unpack this. When you have a large group conversation, you could think about all the different skills that the children are having to practice. For example, raising their hand when they want to speak, right? Having the inhibitory control or the impulse control to hold on to that thought and raise their hand and wait to be called, to not interrupt
Yeah, I
others.
could not do that.
Right? The cognitive flexibility that's needed to listen to what other people are saying and how that kind of changes how you're going to contribute next. And if someone had just said something that you disagree with or agree with, how does that change the way you're organizing your thinking? So there's again working memory because you're having to track this conversation, you're having to adjust the way you would maybe contribute next to this conversation. Hopefully you're actively listening. That's definitely a skill that they get to practice. They have to practice not being distracted by the behaviors of their peers. So there's so much happening in terms of the development of executive function skills, and we could really unpack each executive function skill in a conversation because they all happen. And then there's another point to be made there when we're talking about early childhood, which is that as we know, executive functions are housed in the prefrontal cortex, and those are still developing through our 20s. So we're not expecting young children to be perfect at all of these things.
Sure.
We're giving them the practice to build these neural networks, right? And these skills. So that's why we have to do them more and more and more. And they're a lot, like I just mentioned, it's a lot of skills that they're working on at the same time. So it's not just the content of the conversation, like the knowledge that hopefully that they are gleaning from the conversation. It's all the skills needed to be part of a conversation, to actively listen to others.
Absolutely. And I love you didn't say the word yet, but you were there. Like I love sort of towards the end of the article you talk about neuroplasticity, right? I mean, this lifelong ability of the brain to change. There's another article in Think Differently and Deeply read by our former colleague, written by our former colleague Ava Schultes and the neural artist Greg Dunn that focuses on neuroplasticity. And yours go so well together because we know that early childhood, those early years, that the brain is changing, has potential to change in such really impressive ways, right? And also kids making new connections and old connections. And so I love that you certainly address that. How has your brain changed? So like, you've been teaching for I don't know how many I've known you a long time.
25
Yeah,
years?
25 years, right? And I'm assuming you're teaching differently today than you were 25 years ago, right? And you mentioned about how your research has informed your practice. But if you would say, look, I'm really doing this differently today than I was maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, because of the research I get to look at or the work I do with the CTTL team, where would you say like maybe this most significant changes in your mindset, your thinking, or actually your instructional design might appear?
Well, I
And I
think
know there's probably multiple spaces for you because we've talked a lot about play and so many others.
right, right. I'm thinking of so many different things. I think when I started, I already had a pretty well established belief in the potential of children to surprise me with their
Well,
well, in positive ways.
I'll just say this: there are early child and elementary teachers out there right now laughing as well because we are surprised by them every day.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. But by their intellectual curiosity and their creativity, and I remember early on designing some lessons, this is back at Bing, actually, and we did a lot of open-ended activities, and I was still learning the value of open-ended activities, and because this was early in my career, when I saw that the children were able to create things that I could not even imagine, like, there was no way I could have designed that activity that they ended where they took it, I would have never thought possible for their age. So I learned early on that we underestimate children and their own intellectual curiosity and inquiry and where that could lead them, especially when they're intrinsically motivated and feeling passionate about the thing that they're curious about. If we can facilitate and scaffold that learning, they could go so far with it. So I had an inkling of that. I had a belief that that could be possible. And then it was through teaching and research that I have come to understand just how powerful those ideas are. So that's one. I
And I
also,
just want to comment on that one because I know we've had these conversations about at what point do we release kids to sort of construct knowledge and learning on their own? Like, what prior knowledge do they need, right? Because there is some great research around constructivist education and when is the right time and when does a student have the right knowledge and do all students have the same knowledge and I know I love those conversations we've had about that research body, so I liked how you explained it, but I also, as I was reading David Yeager's recent book on motivation, I think we do sometimes underestimate the readiness and the ability of kids to really take and run with things. I heard the other day, I was talking to a teacher. Sometimes we fall back on this or not developmentally ready, and I sometimes cringe. I don't know about that because I think we can get them developmentally ready in our role as experts and experience of teachers. So love how you presented that and how you've changed your mindset and thinking. You had one more. I'm sure you have 10 more, but what's another area that you say, like I think I'm thinking or doing things a little differently?
I'm gonna say 2 more, even though
Okay.
you only asked
No,
for
no.
1
Will
more.
you
I'm gonna
control the mic
connect
right now? You clearly have no control over the podcast at this
well,
point.
I'm gonna connect what we're talking
Oh,
about
well
now
done. Well
to
done. Okay, so
neuroplasticity.
one and one and a half.
Right, so I think I had an idea, yeah, this is a half. I think I had an idea of neuroplasticity, and now I know about neuroplasticity. I think that that continuously helps me rethink what I'm doing, understand what children are doing, stay optimistic about what they're doing, know the power of scaffolding, know the power of practice, 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 since they're building these neural networks. And then I would say I am using more retrieval practice in all of my classes, but more so in my older. So now that I teach preschool through second grade, I use a lot of active retrieval. We had brain awareness week last week. They learned a ton. We did some really fun oral exams yesterday. I had
Nice.
so much fun with them. It's amazing how
Did
much
you just
they
use the word
learned.
oral exams talking about early child and
I
elementary?
did.
Okay, so we're gonna unpack that in part two because
Okay.
people are like, people's hair might be going crazy. I love that. Though now I'm intrigued, so I will leave that
Mhm.
for part two. So here's this. I think the people in the audience would appreciate this. When we scheduled this initial time, we gave ourselves about 45 minutes to an hour. And guess what? There was in our studio area, students were having fun outside of it. They were making a lot of noise. We couldn't start the recording in time. And for teachers out there, you'll appreciate this. Tia has to race in a moment to go to lunch duty in the elementary world. So before I let her go, and this is part one of a two-parter, people are going to open up and see your title of your article, right? And it's gonna read, feel like early childhood, and somebody in the middle school or upper school are going to say, it's not for me. Or even your title of your book, right? Early childhood. Can you just make a quick pitch for why teachers at all grade levels might want to read both your article and your book, even if they teach the biggest kids in a secondary school or maybe at the college level?
Yeah, because we all have brains.
Yes.
And everything I'm talking about now and everything I talk about in the book applies to anyone with a brain. It's not just informative and I think fascinating to learn about how these ideas impact young children and child development, but it's important that we understand this is true for all of us, and it's absolutely true for our older students.
And they're creating dispositions of mind that
Yes.
they're going to take with them throughout their educational journey. But I think we should leave, we're going to leave with this fact, and I don't know if anybody wants to write in and dispute this fact, is that we do all have brains. And they will be with every one of our students in every one of the schools that we work with today. So this is part one. Got to send Tia off to lunch duty. Some teachers will know exactly what that means and the exciting events that could happen during that period. But Tia, I look forward to having you back for part two. Thanks for your initial time, and most importantly, thanks for the friendship and the wonderful collegiality we've been able to maintain and grow over the years.
Oh, it's mutual. Thank you, Glenn.
At St. Andrews, we often end our classes with some form of exit ticket or active retrieval of information that was a focal point of the day's class. We know from mind, brain, and education research that if students don't start recalling or using their learning, they are bound to forget it. So, in that research informed spirit, here is your exit ticket for part one of this conversation with Tia Henteleff. How might understanding the science of how the youngest learners in our schools or programs learn and develop help inform and transform how we teach during this important period of brain development? Tweet your answers to @the CTTL. We look forward to seeing what you come up with. At St. Andrews, we often end our classes with some form of exit ticket or active retrieval of information that was a focal point of the day's class. We know from mind, brain, and education research that if students don't start recalling or using their learning, they are bound to forget it. So, in that research informed spirit, here is your exit ticket for part one of this conversation with Tia Henteleff. How might understanding the science of how the youngest learners in our schools or programs learn and develop help inform and transform how we teach during this important period of brain development? Tweet your answers to @the CTTL. We look forward to seeing what you come up with. You can learn more about us at thecttl.org, and you can connect with us on X @thecttl, LinkedIn, or Facebook. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's a lot of podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review, as this action will help us reach and benefit others like you. Thanks for listening.